The last confirmed sighting of Emily Carter was at a gas station on Highway 19, just outside Pine Hollow, Oregon. The grainy security footage showed her standing by her silver Toyota Corolla, dressed in a maroon hoodie and jeans, as she filled up her tank. She exchanged a few words with the attendant, smiling as she paid for her gas and a bottle of water. At 7:42 p.m., she pulled out onto the highway, disappearing into the night. Emily was on her way to Lake Serenity, a quiet retreat where she and her best friend Rachel Moore had planned a weekend getaway. It was supposed to be a break from the stress of college and work, a chance to relax before midterms. But Emily never arrived. Rachel's first calls to Emily went unanswered. At first she assumed Emily had lost signal. Some areas near the lake had spotty reception. But as the night stretched on and messages went unread, Rachel's worry turned into panic. By sunrise, she had already called Emily's parents, who confirmed they hadn't heard from her either. By mid-morning, the Lane County Sheriff's Department was involved. Emily's last phone ping had been near mile marker 56, close to a dense stretch of the Pine Hollow National Forest. It was off her expected route. She shouldn't have been anywhere near there. Then, a chilling discovery. A patrol car located Emily's Toyota Corolla on a narrow dirt road leading into the forest. The car was locked. The keys were still in the ignition, her phone and purse sat untouched on the passenger seat, the engine was off, and the headlights were dead, as if someone had carefully parked it there before vanishing into the darkness. There were no footprints, no obvious signs of a struggle, just the silent trees towering over the vehicle, watching, waiting. A cold wind rustled the branches as Sheriff Mark Grayson stood beside the abandoned car, surveying the eerie scene. "Where the hell did she go?" he muttered. No one knew it yet, but Emily Carter had just become the latest mystery in a town where people sometimes disappeared without a trace. Sheriff Mark Grayson had been with the Lane County Sheriff's Department for over 15 years. He had seen plenty of missing persons cases, hikers getting lost in the dense Oregon wilderness, teenagers running away from home, even a few kidnappings. But something about Emily Carter's disappearance felt off. By the time the search party reached Emily's abandoned car, the morning sun had burned away the mist clinging to the forest floor. The car was locked, the keys still in the ignition, and her phone and purse sat untouched on the passenger seat. That detail gnawed at Grayson. If Emily had willingly left her car, wouldn't she have taken her phone? Deputies canvassed the area, calling Emily's name. Search dogs were brought in, sniffing through the underbrush, but the dogs didn't catch a strong scent trail leading away from the car. It was as if Emily had just vanished. Rachel arrived at the sheriff's station later that afternoon, clutching her phone. Her hands shook as she scrolled through the last texts Emily had sent the night before. One message sent at 7:55 p.m. made Rachel's blood run cold. "This car behind me has been following me for a while. Kind of freaking out. Probably nothing. LOL." Rachel shoved the phone toward Sheriff Grayson. She knew something was wrong, she said, her voice breaking. She was scared. Grayson's jaw tightened. If Emily had been followed, who was driving that car? Deputies checked nearby security footage. The gas station where Emily was last seen had one old camera angled toward the pumps. When they pulled up the footage, Emily's silver Toyota was clear as day, but behind her, parked a few pumps away, was a dark-colored pickup truck. The driver never got out, never pumped gas, just sat there watching. The timestamp? 7:42 p.m., minutes before Emily's last message. "Jesus," one of the deputies muttered. Sheriff Grayson's gut told him this was no accident. Someone had been following Emily, and now she was missing. The search expanded that night. Flashlights flickered through the dense trees, voices called her name, but as darkness fell over Pine Hollow, one thing became terrifyingly clear. Emily was nowhere to be found. The first real lead in Emily Carter's disappearance came from an unlikely source. A hunter named Dale Whitaker, who had been tracking deer deep in Pine Hollow National Forest on the night she vanished. When the sheriff's department put out a call for information, Dale came forward, his face grim. He told the deputies that around 9:30 p.m., roughly 2 hours after Emily's last known location at the gas station, he had spotted a man walking through the woods with a flashlight. The stranger moved in a deliberate way, scanning the ground as if searching for something. Dell had called out, assuming it was another hunter, but the man froze, turned off his flashlight, and disappeared into the trees without a word. "What did he look like?" Sheriff Grayson asked. "Tall, lean, wearing a dark hoodie. I couldn't see his face," Dale admitted, "but he was up to something. People don't just wander around out there in the middle of the night." The statement sent a chill through the investigators. Was this the same person who had been following Emily in the pickup truck? Determined to uncover more, the sheriff's department combed through additional security footage from businesses along Highway 19A. A diner camera picked up something disturbing. At 7:55 p.m., just after Emily sent the text about being followed, a black pickup truck was seen trailing behind her Toyota Corolla. The truck had no license plates. Rachel, who had been sitting in on the investigation, gasped when she saw the footage. "That's him," she whispered. "That's the guy who took her." Meanwhile, the search teams continued scouring the woods near Emily's car. At first, they found nothing. No footprints, no broken branches, no obvious clues. But then, a sheriff's deputy stumbled across something half buried in the dirt. A single silver earring. Rachel immediately recognized it. Emily wore those every day. It was proof that Emily had been there, somewhere in those woods. But was she still alive? As night fell again over Pine Hollow, one terrifying question loomed over the investigation. If Emily had been taken into the woods, why hadn't anyone heard her scream? The case took a dark turn 3 days after Emily Carter disappeared. Just when hope was beginning to wane, her credit card was used 50 miles south of Pine Hollow at a gas station in Grants Pass, Oregon. Sheriff Grayson and his team immediately pulled the security footage. The video showed a man in a baseball cap walking inside the gas station, casually grabbing a few snacks and a drink before paying with Emily's card. He kept his head down, his cap shielding most of his face. It wasn't Emily. The cashier remembered him, though. He seemed jumpy, she told the investigators. Kept looking over his shoulder, like he was waiting for someone to walk in. Who was he waiting for? Deputies traced the transaction back to a known drifter, James Holloway, a man with a long history of petty theft and trespassing. Holloway was no stranger to law enforcement. He had been picked up multiple times for loitering around campsites and national parks, lurking just out of sight. And, more importantly, he had been seen in Pine Hollow just days before Emily vanished. The sheriff's department wasted no time tracking him down. They found Holloway at an abandoned campsite deep in the woods, living out of his beat-up pickup truck. When deputies moved in, he didn't run, he just smirked. That smirk vanished when they searched his campsite. Emily's jacket, torn and covered in dirt. A lock of hair tied with a rubber band. And worst of all, a notebook filled with disturbing entries. Some were just dates and locations, places where young women had gone missing over the years. Others were detailed descriptions, appearances, cars, even daily routines, and near the bottom of the page, one entry stood out. Emily Carter, silver Toyota Corolla, gas station, Highway 19. Scared. Perfect. Rachel felt sick when she read it. That son of a... Sheriff Grayson clenched his jaw. "Where is she, Holloway?" But Holloway just leaned back in his chair, grinning like he had all the time in the world. "She ran," he said, voice low. "Thought she could get away, but out there, in the dark?" He chuckled. "Ain't no getting away from those woods." James Holloway sat in the cold, windowless interrogation room, his hands cuffed to the metal table. He leaned back in his chair with an infuriating smirk, tapping his fingers against the tabletop as if he had all the time in the world. Across from him, Sheriff Mark Grayson and FBI Special Agent Diana Holt weren't in the mood for games. Emily Carter had been missing for 5 days, and if she was still alive, time was running out. "Where is she, Holloway?" Grayson asked, his voice steady but sharp. Holloway shrugged. "Told you already. She ran, but ain't no getting away from those woods." Agent Holt leaned forward, sliding a photograph across the table. Emily's torn jacket found at his campsite. This says otherwise. For the first time, Holloway's grin faltered. His eyes flicked down at the photo, then back up, but he stayed silent. Holt pressed on. You targeted her, didn't you? You followed her from the gas station, drove her off the road. She paused, watching his expression. Did she fight back? A muscle in Holloway's jaw twitched. She's still out there, isn't she? Grayson pushed. Alone, lost, starving, and if she dies, that's murder. Holloway's smirk finally disappeared. He exhaled sharply, shaking his head. You're wasting time. Grayson's stomach clenched. That wasn't a denial. Deputies and search teams were already out combing the deeper parts of Pine Hollow National Forest, but without precise directions, it was like searching for a needle in a haystack. Emily had been on foot for days. If she was still alive, she wouldn't last much longer. Agent Holt leaned in closer. Her voice dropped to a near whisper. You think you're in control here, James? You're not. The second she's found, and she will be found, your little game is over. Holloway's gaze darted between them. He swallowed hard, then, finally, he exhaled and muttered. South Side, old ranger station. She won't last another night. Sheriff Grayson didn't waste a second. He bolted out of the room, barking orders into his radio. The search party had a new target. But the question remained, would they get to Emily in time? The rescue team raced against time, pushing through the dense underbrush of Pine Hollow National Forest toward the abandoned ranger station Holloway had mentioned. The structure had been out of use for decades, swallowed by nature, a place forgotten by most. Sheriff Mark Grayson, Agent Deanna Holt, and a group of deputies moved fast, flashlights sweeping across the trees. The air was thick with tension. The only sounds there hurried footsteps and the distant rustle of wind through the branches. Then, a noise. Faint. Weak. A voice. Help. Rachel, who had insisted on joining the search, froze. That's her. She took off running before anyone could stop her, barreling through the forest. The others followed, weapons drawn, ready for the worst. And then, just past the rotting wooden walls of the ranger station, they found her. Emily Carter lay curled against a tree, her face pale, her lips cracked from dehydration. Her clothes were torn, her arms covered in scratches from pushing through the forest. Her eyes widened in disbelief as she saw them. Rachel? Her voice was barely above a whisper. Rachel dropped to her knees beside her best friend, tears streaming down her face. Oh my God, Emily! Sheriff Grayson and Agent Holt quickly checked her vitals. She was weak, disoriented, but alive. What happened? Holt asked gently. Emily's breath hitched as she tried to speak. He grabbed me, took me off the road, but when he left to get something from his truck, I ran. Her voice trembled. I've been hiding. I didn't know if he'd come back. Grayson exhaled slowly. If she hadn't escaped, she wouldn't have lasted much longer. The sound of sirens filled the distance as paramedics arrived, pushing through the trees to reach her. Rachel refused to let go of Emily's hand as they placed her on a stretcher. As they carried Emily to safety, Grayson looked back at the dark, silent woods behind them. Holloway had lied about one thing. She hadn't run because she was scared. She had run because she wasn't going to let him win.